Hello there. In this week's work, you're going to be working on your final draft. So to start out with for draft 4, you'll want to make those changes that were recommended from both the second and the third draft, similar to how you documented your changes from the first draft. So while you're making those changes, if you have any trouble with the code, if you have any questions, maybe you changed some formatting and you want me to look at it, I'm more than happy, to look at that with you. Remember that if you are in section 001, we have that class time that's reserved for you to come and ask questions. I also have office hours every week. And then, of course, if you can't make either of those, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have via email. So if you need any help with those changes or you have questions, please do reach out. That's what I'm here for, and I'm more than happy to help. So for the new parts for this draft, you're going to be working on both the executive summary and you're going to be filling in parts of the appendix. So the executive summary is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a summary of your overall work. So the first piece in the executive summary are going to be the major findings. So what are some of the major findings that you found, especially when comparing those demographic variables to your variables of interest? So for example, if you were looking at colorectal cancer screenings, did you find that some variables were associated with that? So for example, with education, did you find that maybe those with higher levels of education were more likely to receive colorectal cancer screenings than those that did not? You also may have found some other interesting things. So for example, if you were looking at HPV test, you may have found large percentages of people that said they didn't know they had received the test. That in itself is a very interesting finding. So located in the directions are more information about those major findings to include. You'll also want to talk about your limitations. So one of the main limitations for your data analysis are going to be that you were looking at the unweighted data, and so you'll talk about that limitation. And one reason that I wanted you all to include the limitations is because no matter what data analysis you do, there are always likely going to be some limitations. And so having a limitation in your data analysis isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we can't help but have limitations. And the important part is that when we describe in our reports the analysis that was performed, that we're just very upfront and transparent about what those limitations might be. And then finally, you'll write a short conclusion, basically just talking about how your report could be used by a public health practitioner. And so those will be the three main pieces of the executive summary. Again, more information is provided in the actual assignment directions. And then finally, for the appendix should be pretty straightforward. You're pretty much going to build two tables, one that contains any abbreviations that you may have used. It's pretty common in public health that we use a lot of different abbreviations, for example, the BRFSS. And so having a nice table in the appendix that kind of lays out what all those abbreviations are for the reader is usually pretty important. And then finally, you'll want to include all of the variable names in your report. So often when we write our report, we don't include the variable names from the data set. They're not often that informative. So instead of including those abbreviate variable names, we just say what they are in our tables or in our report. But if someone were to come behind us and use the same data set, they would need to know what those actual variable names are. So instead of including them in the report, we include them in the appendix. And you'll see in the directions how to create that table where you include those variable names in the appendix. So if someone were to want to reproduce your work, they would easily be able to do so. So as always, if while working on your report you have any questions or concerns, you want me to look at anything, please do reach out. Again, for those of you in section 001, we have that reserved class time that is just for you to come and ask questions. I'm more than happy to sit down with you one-on-one and look at any of your work and, basically, any questions that you have, I'm more than happy to answer them. I have the online office hours, and then of course, using the discussion board or email, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. So as always, I hope that you have a wonderful week, and if there's anything that I can do to assist, please let me know.